On the stone platform, Dragon Arm Supreme stood with his hands behind his back. His figure was as imposing as an iron tower, and simply standing there exuded a heavy, mountain-like pressure, as if even the very earth beneath him trembled. Dragon Arm Supreme and the Withered Elder were both top-tier powerhouses in the Northern Domain, but Dragon Arm Supreme's achievements far surpassed those of the Withered Elder. It was said that even the Divine Hall once tried to recruit him, but they ultimately failed. The reason? They sent a Hall Master to engage him, only to be completely outclassed in their confrontation. This shows just how powerful and renowned Dragon Arm Supreme was in the Northern Domain. In contrast, although Chen had gained some recognition in the Northern Domain over the past few years, most people still viewed him as a promising youth. After all, many believed that while the younger generation certainly had potential, it was impossible for them to rival a top-tier figure like Dragon Arm Supreme at this point in time. Thus, when Dragon Arm Supreme took the stage and directly addressed Chen, all eyes in the plaza turned toward the latter. However, after the recent reversal in the Nine Nether battle, no one mocked or scoffed. Given the current situation, it was clear that Chen must have some means at his disposal. Otherwise, with his personality, he would never have dared to challenge Dragon Arm Supreme. The crowd's curiosity was piqued. What kind of threat could Chen's self-perceived abilities pose to Dragon Arm Supreme? Under the intense gaze of countless curious eyes, Chen's youthful and handsome face remained calm. He looked at Dragon Arm Supreme, who stood motionless on the stone platform, exuding an overwhelming aura, and then gave a slight smile. In the next moment, his figure flashed, appearing atop the stone platform. King, you've hidden your spiritual energy. What's this? Have you broken through to 9th grade Supreme? If so, I'd truly be impressed today. Dragon Arm Supreme locked eyes with Chen, his voice carrying a faint trace of mockery. Even with the 9 Nether example in mind, he knew that Chen had not reached 9th grade Supreme. No matter what methods Chen had used, it was impossible for him to break through so quickly in such a short amount of time. Even if he had relied on a huge stroke of fortune, such a rapid breakthrough would surely lead to an unstable foundation, making future progress impossible. In his eyes, Chen was no threat. Chen sensed his intent but wasn't angered. Instead, he smiled and softly replied, I haven't reached 9th grade Supreme yet. As soon as Chen said this, Dragon Arm Supreme's tense posture relaxed slightly. As long as Chen hadn't reached 9th grade Supreme, he wasn't worried about any tricks Chen might have. A few relieved voices echoed across the plaza. Some of the kings also secretly sighed in relief. If even King had reached 9th grade Supreme, how would they survive? 9th grade Supreme is a threshold that cannot be surpassed. Chen looked up, gazing at the now slightly relaxed Dragon Arm Supreme. But I'm just half a step away. Boom. At the moment Chen finished his sentence, a surge of spiritual energy erupted from his body like a massive tidal wave. In an instant, spiritual energy swept across the heavens and the earth, resembling an enormous wave crashing. Thunderous roars filled the air as violent winds began to whip up. Chen's robes fluttered without wind, making a crisp sound. He wore a smile, but a powerful, oppressive aura emanated from his body. The expressions of the many powerful figures who had just relaxed. And the plaza froze instantly. As they felt the overwhelming pressure, their scalps went numb. Such a fluctuation in spiritual energy hadn't reached 9th grade Supreme, but it had already surpassed the realm of 8th grade Supreme. Chen was now undeniably half a step into 9th grade Supreme. King had indeed become a half-step 9th grade powerhouse. He was now just half a step away from the true 9th grade. The Xun'er King, Mountain Splitting King, Blood Eagle King, and others all showed stunned expressions. When Chen had left before, he had just broken through to 6th grade Supreme. Yet, in less than a year, his strength had surged to half a step into 9th grade. The 9 Nether King had made such a leap because she had a divine beast physique, which was different from humans in terms of cultivation. That was somewhat understandable, but now, why was Chen progressing so rapidly as well? The entire square fell into a stunned silence, with countless strong figures left speechless. Even the 3 sovereigns had solemn expressions on their faces, especially the Heavenly Vulture Emperor. His eyes were filled with complexity as he recalled when Chen first arrived in the Great Luo Heaven Domain alongside the 9 Nether. Back then, he had just barely cultivated his supreme Dharmakaya. Yet now, after only a few years, he was only a step away from catching up to him. Back then, I knew this child was extraordinary, but I never expected it to happen so fast. The Heavenly Vulture Emperor sighed. Given Chen's cultivation speed, it wouldn't be long before he truly surpassed him. This child's future was limitless. If given enough time, forget about reaching the 9th grade supreme. At that point, he might even be on par with domain lords, holding true equal standing with them. At this point, the Heavenly Vulture Emperor began to understand why the domain lord treated Mu Chen so unusually. Of course, there might be other reasons involved, but perhaps the domain lord's foresight was truly exceptional, recognizing Mu Chen's immense potential. Therefore, he hadn't treated him as a subordinate but as a friend. Even though the gap in status between them remained considerable, still, when Mu Chen was first met, who could have imagined that just a few years later, he would have reached this level? Half-step 9th grade. Amid the uproar, Dragon Arm Supreme's face twitched as he looked toward the young figure ahead. Although he had anticipated Mu Chen's strength, the reality still sent a chill through him. Mu Chen, still so young, had already reached the half-step 9th grade. This kind of talent was hard to believe. What struck Dragon Arm Supreme as even more incredible was the spiritual energy erupting from Mu Chen's body, dense and continuous, as if it was inexhaustible. There wasn't a trace of emptiness or instability in it, which meant that Mu Chen's foundation was even more solid than imagined. It was unimaginable. In just 1 year, Mu Chen's strength had skyrocketed by nearly 3 grades. Even if he had used the heaven and earth divine treasure to boost his power, such a surge would usually result in uncontrollable spiritual energy. But now, the overwhelming spiritual energy was under Mu Chen's control, as if he commanded it effortlessly, without any chaos. This kid, Dragon Arm Supreme, furrowed his brows, a flicker of wariness flashing in his eyes. The earlier underestimation he had felt was completely gone, replaced by full recognition of Mu Chen's bizarre and undeniable strength. Seems like Mu King really came prepared. Dragon Arm Supreme took a deep breath, suppressing the emotions in his heart. His expression gradually became calm, like a placid lake. Now was not the time to ponder why Mu Chen's strength had increased so quickly or why his spiritual energy remained so stable. To gain more authority and resources in the great Luo Heaven domain. The position of new emperor was something he could not afford to lose. On the bright side, though, Mu Chen was still only at the half-step 9th grade. There was still a noticeable gap between him and a true 9th grade supreme. As long as he didn't underestimate Mu Chen, he should still be able to suppress him with his own strength today. With that thought, Dragon Arm Supreme looked toward Mu Chen, his expression blank, and said, "Mu King, reaching half-step 9th grade at such a young age is indeed rare. But if you want me to relinquish the new emperor position, we'll see if your half-step 9th grade is enough to challenge me." Boom. As soon as Dragon Arm Supreme's words fell, a burst of brilliant light erupted from his eyes. In an instant, boundless spiritual energy swept across the sky, causing winds to whip up and the world to darken. The ground beneath his feet rumbled and trembled as though it were crying out in pain. Dragon Arm Supreme's already massive frame seemed to grow even taller, an overwhelming pressure spreading across the area, suffocating everyone in its wake. The spiritual energy pressure that had emanated from Mu Chen earlier was completely swept away at this moment, as Dragon Arm Supreme's aura was dominant, like a war god, making it impossible to challenge him. With his first move, Dragon Arm Supreme revealed shocking power. The oppressive aura he emitted was even stronger than that of the withered elder. Under the watchful eyes of countless reverent gazes, Dragon Arm Supreme slowly clenched his palms. A tremendous surge of spiritual light erupted, forming countless ancient and obscure spiritual runes across his body. His arms blazed with crimson light, and faint dragon roars could be heard, shaking the very heavens and earth. Boom! Dragon Arm Supreme's arms trembled, and the fabric on his arms turned to ash, dissipating into the air. Beneath it, his arms were revealed to be as thick as a child's waist, with crimson dragon scales emerging on them. His fingers gradually became sharp, resembling dragon claws. Upon seeing Dragon Arm Supreme's arms, even the Heavenly Vulture Emperor and the Spirit Pupil Emperor's expressions changed slightly, their eyes showing some apprehension. It was said that Dragon Arm Supreme's arms possessed the power of the Dragon Clan. He had once fought against other top-tier experts who had entered the 9th grade and, with the sheer strength of his arms, had shattered his opponent's supreme Dharmakaya. Thus, many 9th grade supreme experts would approach Dragon Arm Supreme with great caution. The power in his arms was overwhelmingly domineering. This person clearly held Mu Chen in high regard as well, as he had no hesitation in revealing his dragon arms, clearly intending to go all out and strike Mu Chen down with a thunderous force. This guy is being cautious. Mu Chen is in real danger now. The Heavenly Vulture Emperor and others exchanged glances, their expressions grave. With Mu Chen's half-step 9th grade strength, facing the power of these dragon arms, he would likely gain no advantage at all. Amidst the countless solemn gazes, Mu Chen took a deep breath, and in the depths of his dark eyes, it seemed as though a blazing fire was gathering. Dragon arm power? Huh. Mu Chen muttered to himself, then slowly clenched both his hands on his arms. The true dragon and phoenix spirit, which had an aura of dark gold, slowly opened the eyes of the dragon and phoenix. Let me test it. And see whose power is superior, your dragon arm strength or my true dragon and phoenix power. Roar. On the massive stone platform, Dragon Arm Supreme stood arrogantly, his arms red as fire, dragon scales emerging, resembling a pair of fierce dragon arms. From them, there was a faint, spine-chilling sound of dragon roars reverberating. Countless gazes were filled with awe as they looked at Dragon Arm Supreme's fierce dragon arms. These arms were the trump card that had earned him his fame, and his title was derived from them. Over the years, many top-tier experts in the northern domain had fallen to his dragon arms, solidifying Dragon Arm Supreme's reputation. Before Dragon Arm Supreme stood Mu Chen, who was calm with his hands slightly lowered. His eyes were half-closed, and a tremendous amount of spiritual energy surrounded him, making him seem extraordinary as the space around him trembled. Boom. However, in response to Mu Chen, Dragon Arm Supreme merely glanced indifferently at him. The next moment, his eyes flashed with brilliance, and he suddenly extended his foot, stomping heavily down. Boom. As Dragon Arm Supreme's foot landed, the massive mountain supporting the square seemed to tremble violently, and the hard stone beneath his foot shattered instantly. A huge crack, resembling a stone dragon, roared outward. Within the crack, stones mixed with gusting winds swirled violently, accompanied by a terrifying force that ripped through everything in its path. As soon as Dragon Arm Supreme made a move, he displayed an incredibly brutal and domineering posture. This seemingly simple stomp could, in reality, shatter even a dozen top-tier 8th grade Supremes working together. They would be crushed into a cloud of flesh and blood. As the dragon-like fissure rushed toward him, Mu Chen slowly opened his eyes. Deep in his dark pupils, a fiery determination surged. Instead of retreating, he stepped forward, stomping down with his own foot. A vast amount of spiritual energy surged into the ground, causing the earth beneath his feet to crack. A similar massive fissure shot out, glowing with immense spiritual energy, clearly formed from a powerful force. Facing Dragon Arm Supreme's overwhelming and domineering attack, Mu Chen chose to meet it head-on, not retreating at all. The two fierce fissures shot out from either side of the massive stone platform. In the next moment, they collided with lightning speed, crashing together in a brutal confrontation. Boom. In the instant of the collision, a rain of shattered stones erupted, and the massive stone platform cracked with a thunderous sound, splitting into two halves. The shockwave of the power was visible to the naked eye, and both Mu Chen and Dragon Arm Supreme were shaken, pushed back by the force. Boom. Boom. Mu Chen staggered backwards several steps, each step leaving a deep imprint on the ground. By the time his last step fell, even his bare feet had sunk into the hard stone slab beneath him. On the other hand, Dragon Arm Supreme only took a single step back, firmly halting his movement. This first direct clash clearly showed that Dragon Arm Supreme still held the advantage, albeit marginal. Yet, for both Dragon Arm Supreme and the countless powerful warriors on the square, their pupils contracted. Subtly, that kick from earlier, while not Dragon Arm Supreme's full force, carried such destructive power that no half-step 9th grade expert could withstand it. However, Mu Chen not only endured it head-on but only had to retreat a few steps as the price. The advantage held by Dragon Arm Supreme was negligible. Up above in the sky, the Heavenly Vulture Emperor and the Spirit Pupil Emperor exchanged a glance, their expressions growing increasingly serious. They knew that, faced with the force of Dragon Arm Supreme's kick, even they wouldn't fare much better than Mu Chen. Yet Mu Chen, able to withstand such a blow with just a half-step 9th grade cultivation, clearly demonstrated that his combat strength was far beyond what his outward appearance suggested. Interesting. Dragon Arm Supreme's eyes locked onto Mu Chen like a predator eyeing its prey. He flashed a grin, but before his smile could even fully spread, his body suddenly shot forward. The air itself seemed to explode under the sheer force, and his speed was so fast it resembled a bolt of lightning. Only a few of the strongest warriors on the scene could vaguely catch a glimpse of his figure. Such speed. Countless people gasped in amazement. As the sound of wind and thunder resonated, Mu Chen's gaze sharpened. In the next instant, He crossed his arms in front of him in a defensive stance. Boom. The void space in front of him seemed to tear apart as a fist covered in crimson dragon scales shot out. The terrifying force, capable of reducing mountains to dust, slammed into Mu Chen's crossed arms. Bang! The air exploded, and Mu Chen's body was sent flying back by the overwhelming power. He stumbled backward, with shockwaves from the residual force shaking the nearby air. After sending Mu Chen flying with a single punch, Dragon Arm Supreme gave a cold laugh, not allowing his opponent a moment to recover. With a thunderous sound, he shot forward once again. Boom! His dragon claw-like fist reappeared from the void, aimed straight at Mu Chen's chest. The air in front of the punch was compressed into a concave arc. The dragon fist roared down, but just as it was about to strike Mu Chen, a slender palm suddenly appeared out of nowhere, blocking the dragon fist. The fingers curled, completely enveloping the vicious blow. Hum! A deep sound echoed as the air around them exploded. But on the square, countless powerful warriors couldn't help but twitch their faces in disbelief. In midair, the two figures collided. Dragon Arm Supreme maintained the posture of throwing a punch, while Mu Chen, with his 5 fingers curled, contained the terrifying force of Dragon Arm Supreme's punch. His fingers seemed like an abyss, preventing the Dragon Arm Supreme's power from advancing even an inch. Dragon Arm Supreme's expression shifted slightly, his eyes fixed on Mu Chen's slender palm, and from this close distance, he could see that there was a dark golden dragon claw rune emerging from Mu Chen's sleeve, covering his fingers. As the dark golden dragon claw rune spread, Dragon Arm Supreme felt an oppressive force radiating from it. This pressure made his crimson dragon arm seem to dim slightly. Mu Chen raised his head, looking at the slightly changed expression of Dragon Arm Supreme, his voice calm. The power of the dragon is not yours alone to possess. Oh, really? Dragon Arm Supreme gritted his teeth and sneered. The power of the dragon was his greatest pride. Though he didn't know why Mu Chen also possessed some of it, he could not believe that the latter could surpass him in this aspect. You, a mere young upstart, think you know what true dragon power is? Ridiculous. Dragon Arm Supreme's eyes glowed with fierceness. He focused his mind, and the dragon scales on his arms turned an even deeper red, as if they had turned into molten lava, hot and burning. The sound of a dragon's roar echoed, and it seemed as though a destructive power was rapidly awakening within him. Boom! From a distance, the arms of Dragon Arm Supreme seemed to flow with molten lava, emitting an unmatched, powerful force. Even strong experts like the Heavenly Vulture Emperor had their eyelids twitch at the intensity of the fluctuations. Get out of the way. A terrifying force erupted from his arms as Dragon Arm Supreme roared, his fist suddenly shaking. Mu Chen's hand, which was wrapped around the fist, was forcibly blasted apart. Dragon Arm Supreme broke free from Mu Chen's grip, his eyes turning blood red. Taking a step forward, his fists danced like red dragons, becoming a vast storm of punches. With destructive power, they descended upon Mu Chen. Each punch shattered the void, its power earth-shattering. At this moment, Dragon Arm Supreme was a ferocious sight. Even other supreme experts just entering the 9th grade would not dare face such sharpness head-on. Boom, boom, the sudden violent power of Dragon Arm Supreme immediately suppressed Mu Chen again. The roaring punches forced Mu Chen to retreat. Caught off guard and stumbling, each brutal collision made him grunt in pain. In the sky above, 2 figures intertwined, and the shockwaves of their battle tore apart space, sending tremors through the hearts of countless strong warriors. Bang! Another ferocious clash shook the sky. Mu Chen could no longer withstand the impact. Being sent flying, his feet striking the stone platform, tearing 2 deep marks into it. Mu Chen steadied himself, his clothes tattered and his arms bloodied, but his expression showed no sign of despair. Instead, the heat in his pitch-black eyes burned brighter, his fighting spirit soaring like a furnace. This was his first true confrontation with a 9th grade supreme. Though the battle was intense, Mu Chen's heart surged with joy as he fought. There was a deep sense of satisfaction in realizing how far his strength had advanced. The 9th grade supremes he once viewed as insurmountable were now within his reach. Even though Dragon Arm Supreme unleashed astonishing dragon power, he still only managed to gain a slight advantage. This battle made Mu Chen finally realize that the training and hardships of the past years had not been in vain. He was no longer the same. He couldn't help but smile, the waves of his heart reflecting a new sense of pride. Hey. The wild surge of emotions caused Mu Chen to grin slightly. You can still laugh. From mid-air, Dragon Arm Supreme looked down at Mu Chen, his tone icy and mocking. Mu Chen raised his head, his dark eyes deepening as he smiled faintly. With a slow, deliberate movement, he clenched his fist, his voice cold and determined. Next, I'll send you flying with a punch. If not, I'll admit defeat. Big talk. Dragon Arm Supreme narrowed his eyes, his voice dripping with scorn. Roar. Just as his voice faded, a mighty dragon roar echoed through the skies. Dark golden light erupted from Mu Chen's body, and behind him, a massive 9-clawed dragon, about 100 feet long, materialized in the air. As the 9-clawed dragon took form, a shocking dragon might swept through the area like a storm. The dragon's might descended, and Dragon Arm Supreme's hair stood on end. His pupils shrank to the size of needles as his voice became sharp with shock. This is a true dragon? The dark golden dragon loomed behind Mu Chen, its roar reverberating through the air, and the overwhelming pressure sent tremors through the hearts of the surrounding strong warriors. Is that really a true dragon? The Heavenly Vulture Emperor and Spirit Pupil Emperor both stared in disbelief. The true dragon was the king of dragons, possessing strength that rivaled the Heavenly Supreme. It's not a real true dragon, but it does have the essence of one. The sleeping king, who had unknowingly opened his eyes, said slowly, his gaze fixed on the massive dragon. If I'm not mistaken, this is the result of Mu Chen's dragon phoenix body. I didn't expect that after a year, he's cultivated it to such an astonishing level. The Heavenly Vulture Emperor and Spirit Pupil Emperor exchanged glances, their expressions serious. They were familiar with Mu Chen's dragon phoenix body, but a year ago, he could never have possessed such a fierce true dragon pressure. Just the pressure from this true dragon's manifestation alone, it's clear that he's far beyond the level of an ordinary half-step 9th grade supreme. The two of them sighed inwardly, finally understanding why Mu Chen showed no fear when facing Dragon Arm Supreme. It turned out that he did have some trump cards. Now, with the power of the true dragon shadow, he indeed seemed qualified to contend head-on with the elite powerhouses who had just entered the peak of the 9th grade supreme. On the lofty throne, the petite mandala remained motionless, as steady as a mountain. However, when her golden eyes caught sight of the true dragon shadow behind Mu Chen, a glimmer of surprise flickered in her gaze. Mandala clearly knew more about the dragon and phoenix scripture that Mu Chen cultivated. This true dragon shadow should have been transformed from the true dragon mark on Mu Chen's body back then. While the true dragon mark could provide him with some assistance, its power was clearly limited. Yet now, the true dragon shadow that had emerged from it possessed a spiritual entity and an immensely powerful strength. What on earth has this guy experienced in the past year to cultivate the dragon and phoenix scripture to this level? Mandala was also somewhat puzzled. The dragon and phoenix scripture was not only difficult to cultivate but even harder to improve. It required extremely demanding conditions. By her estimation, evolving the true dragon mark into the current true dragon shadow would have required an unimaginable amount of divine beast essence blood. Could it be that this guy had completely scavenged the remains of the fallen divine beasts in the divine beast plains? While Mandala was musing, Dragon Arm Supreme was also gazing at the true dragon shadow with a heavy expression, deep fear evident in his eyes. He knew very well that the true dragon shadow before him was not an illusion. It truly radiated the aura of a true dragon. That aura caused the dragon power surging within him like a flood to slow down. It was the oppressive majesty of a superior being. The true dragon was the king of the dragon clan, its bloodline noble and mighty. In contrast, his dragon arm came from a flame dragon, whose bloodline was far inferior to that of a true dragon. He found it hard to believe. How could a human like Mu Chen possess the genuine aura of a true dragon? Earlier, he had scoffed at Mu Chen's words, but now, he could no longer afford to be dismissive. The overwhelming momentum of the true dragon shadow made it clear that if he underestimated the coming trial of a single punch, he might truly suffer defeat here today. Huff. With this thought, Dragon Arm Supreme took a deep breath, suppressing the trepidation in his heart. His expression grew increasingly solemn. Slowly clenching his fists, the crimson light on his arms surged, and both arms began to expand. His 10 fingers grew sharper, and dense dragon scales emerged, covering his arms completely. From a distance, his arms no longer bore any resemblance to human limbs, instead transforming into 2 ferocious and terrifying flame dragon claws. As Dragon Arm Supreme summoned all his strength, Mu Chen, standing on the shattered stone platform ahead, glanced at the true dragon shadow coiled in midair. His gaze sharpened suddenly. Buzz! Brilliant golden light erupted from Mu Chen's body, making him appear like a golden war god. Then, he clenched his 5 fingers into a fist and threw a punch with a calm yet heavy expression. This punch was slow and deliberate, as if carrying the weight of 10,000 mountains. Moreover, As Mu Chen's punch extended, the golden light on his radiant body began to shift, flowing like a tide over his body, down his arm, and concentrating on his fist. The condensed golden light transformed his fist into what seemed to be a solid block of gold, and the shockwave from the punch shattered the surrounding space. True Dragon Fist Seal. With a thunderous roar echoing in his mind, Mu Chen unleashed his punch. The surging golden light shot forth from his fist, materializing into a solid golden fist projection. Roar. In midair, the true dragon shadow let out a majestic roar and plunged directly into the golden fist projection. Instantly, dark golden dragon scales sprouted on the fist seal, amplifying its power to an unprecedented level wherever the fist wind passed. The space shattered like fragile glass, cracking inch by inch. The golden fist projection roared forth, leaving countless experts in the square visibly shaken. Even top-tier 9th grade supremes like the Heavenly Vulture Emperor couldn't help but display grave expressions and deep apprehension in their eyes. From the seemingly simple punch of Mu Chen, they all sensed an overwhelming aura of danger. Boom, boom, the golden true dragon fist seal pierced through the void, and in the next instant, it appeared directly in front of Dragon Arm Supreme. The golden light burst forth, seemingly blocking all of Dragon Arm Supreme's retreat paths. The vast and heavy wind of the punch swept towards them, and the golden light flooded their vision, as though a ruler had descended upon the world. The terrifying power made Dragon Arm Supreme's body tremble with cold sweat. You think you can defeat me so easily? The terrifying force enveloped him, and Dragon Arm Supreme glared with fury, shouting angrily. Without hesitation, he launched a powerful palm strike. Boom! Crimson light erupted, and a massive flame dragon roared out from the palm of Dragon Arm Supreme. Engulfing the area in raging flames, seemingly intent on burning the heavens and earth. Boom! The golden fist seal and the flame dragon palm collided fiercely in the midst of countless trembling gazes. A deafening crash echoed through the air, as though a golden red sun had risen from the point of impact, causing the surrounding space to twist violently from the terrifying shockwave. Bang! Bang! The stone platforms below were also affected by the shockwave, each one turning into a cloud of dust. Around the square, countless powerful cultivators turned pale and hastily retreated. Mandala watched the terrifying shockwave and gently flicked her finger. In an instant, spiritual light appeared in the air, and a massive, clear protective dome descended from the sky, enveloping the center of the square, completely blocking the terrifying shock. With Mandala's intervention, the cultivators in the square finally breathed a sigh of relief. Their gazes remained fixed on the center of the square, where the violent golden light erupted, quickly covering the crimson light. Dragon Arm Supreme's expression changed drastically. He had underestimated the terrifying power of Mu Chen's punch. Boom. Before he could make any further moves, the golden light rippled and shattered the space, sweeping towards him. As it passed, his body was struck with great force and sent flying backward in a disheveled manner. Whoosh! Countless onlookers watched in shock as Dragon Arm Supreme's figure was blasted into the air, with explosions in the air behind him, even causing the space to crack apart. Boom! Dragon Arm Supreme retreated several tens of thousands of feet before slamming his palm downward, causing the space to fracture, and finally stabilizing his body. A trace of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth, but he did not wipe it away. Instead, his face darkened as he looked at the distant mountain peak, where the square was located. At this moment, he had been blasted off the mountain by Mu Chen's punch. Dragon Arm Supreme's expression darkened. He never expected that Mu Chen would actually send him flying with a single punch. Meanwhile, the square erupted into a frenzy. Countless cultivators stared in awe at Dragon Arm Supreme, who was floating in the distance with an ugly expression. They exchanged looks, and a cold breath escaped their lips as they realized Mu Chen's punch had sent a top-tier cultivator who had just entered the 9th grade flying for tens of thousands of feet. If any of them had been on the receiving end of that terrifying punch, they likely would have turned to ashes under its force. Their gazes quickly shifted to the center of the square. As the dust settled, a young figure began to emerge clearly. It was Mu Chen, still in the same posture from his punch. His fist was dripping with blood, the result of the tremendous power from the strike. The majestic true dragon shadow had already dissipated, and even the intense fluctuations of his spiritual energy had calmed. He slowly raised his head, revealing his youthful and handsome face. He gazed at Dragon Arm Supreme in the distance, smiling casually, and said, "Dragon Arm Supreme, how was that punch?" This punch had gathered all of Mu Chen's strength, combined with the enhancement of the true dragon shadow. Even a genuine 9th grade Supreme would have to think twice before facing such power. In the sky far away, Dragon Arm Supreme glared at the young figure who smiled confidently. He wanted to strike again, but ultimately, he held back. He knew that, at this moment, he no longer had the certainty of defeating Mu Chen. Although he hadn't used all of his trump cards and powers, he understood that the young man in front of him was likely doing the same. However, if it came down to that, it would be a life-or-death battle, and by then, he might not have absolute confidence in walking away unscathed. He remained silent for a moment before finally clasping his fist from afar, his voice low as he said, "The throne of the new emperor is yours." As the words of Dragon Arm Supreme echoed across the vast square, it was no surprise that they caused an uproar. However, by this time, the shock and the murmurs had faded, replaced by a sense of admiration, because Mu Chen, standing there, had already proven his strength. Half a step into the 9th grade Supreme, he possessed the true battle power to challenge those who had just entered the 9th grade Supreme. He truly had the qualifications to be crowned emperor. "Truly impressive," said the Xun'er king, his usual serious face showing some signs of emotion as he gazed at the young figure standing amidst the chaos, before sighing. Thinking back to when Mu Chen first arrived in the Great Luo Heaven Domain, he was just a mere commander. But several years later, he had directly surpassed all of them and leaped to become an emperor. The other veteran kings also sighed, for they had witnessed Mu Chen's rise step by step and saw him reach such an incredible level. "Blood Eagle King, you had many conflicts with them back then." The mountain-splitting king glanced at the Blood Eagle King and teased with a smile. When the 9 Nether returned, there was no shortage of friction with the Blood Eagle King, which caused quite a stir in the Great Luo Heaven Domain. Hearing this, the Blood Eagle King immediately became embarrassed. If he had known that Mu Chen and 9 Nether would reach this point, he would never have dared to offend them. However, fortunately, despite some disputes, he had kept his distance from the line, or else he would have been trembling now. The other new kings in the area also exchanged quiet words. After all, the situation was unexpected. No one had anticipated that Dragon Arm Supreme and the Withered Elder would fail in the new emperor competition. As a result, Mu Chen and 9 Nether would become the 4th and 5th emperors of the Great Luo Heaven Domain. The addition of these 2 new emperors would inevitably shift the balance of power in the Great Luo Heaven Domain. After all, in the Great Luo Heaven Domain, the power of an emperor was immense and could even determine the resources allocated to the kings. Some of the new kings were already secretly considering whether they should show signs of allegiance to seek protection from the 2 new emperors. The square was abuzz with discussions, and the Heavenly Vulture Emperor and Spirit Pupil Emperor wore smiles. After all, 9 Nether and Mu Chen were somewhat old hands. Even if they became emperors, their resistance would be minimal, as it was certainly better than Dragon Arm Supreme and the Withered Elder rising to the throne. In the lofty throne, Mandala also stood up. Her petite figure was unassuming, but as she rose, the once bustling square fell into silence. Whether it was the veteran kings or the rebellious new kings, they all cast looks of awe at her. Upper Earth Supreme, the number 1 person in the Northern Domain. These titles made Mandala the most sought-after figure in the Northern Domain. The battle for the throne has ended. From today, the Great Luo Heaven Domain gains 2 new emperors, Emperor Mu and Emperor 9 Nether. Mandala's calm and slightly delicate voice echoed. Congratulations to Emperor Mu and Emperor 9 Nether on their ascension to the throne. At once, the square was filled with numerous congratulatory voices. Envious gazes turned toward Mu Chen and 9 Nether. Such young emperors were a first in the history of the Great Luo Heaven Domain. However, while they envied Mu Chen and 9 Nether's youth, they also secretly marveled at their astonishing talent and strength. At such a young age, they could battle with top-tier, long-established experts like Dragon Arm Supreme and the Withered Elder, and even gain the upper hand. Such potential was truly awe-inspiring. Mandala's golden eyes turned toward Dragon Arm Supreme and the Withered Elder, and she comforted them. "You two may have lost this time, but there is no need to be overly discouraged. You both possess the strength to become emperors. You simply lack a little experience and time." After all, Dragon Arm Supreme and the Withered Elder were 9th grade Supremes. Their top-tier combat strength was crucial for the Great Luo Heaven Domain, so Mandala naturally had to console them, lest they harbor resentment. Of course, these two had a rebellious streak. If they had ascended the throne immediately, their arrogance would have likely grown, which wouldn't be good for the Great Luo Heaven Domain. So, Mandala was actually pleased to see Mu Chen and 9 Nether outmaneuvering them for the throne. Hearing Mandala's soothing words, Dragon Arm Supreme and the Withered Elder's expression softened slightly. After this ordeal, Their once proud hearts had been humbled quite a bit. When they first joined the Great Luo Heaven Domain, they were highly confident, seeing themselves as superior. After all, in the entire Great Luo Heaven Domain, only Mandala and the Sleeping King were worthy of their respect. Even the Heavenly Vulture Emperor and the Spirit Pupil Emperor were considered beneath them. This was because when they ascended to the 9th grade Supreme and became the top powerhouses in the Northern Domain, commanding winds and rain, both the Heavenly Vulture Emperor and Spirit Pupil Emperor were still merely 8th grade Supremes. Thus, they naturally believed that upon entering the Great Luo Heaven Domain, they would be granted a position just below Mandala, and that the throne was destined to be theirs. No one else could challenge their claim. However, who could have predicted that at such a critical moment, two figures, King Mu and Nine Nether King, would emerge, shattering their confidence and leaving them feeling utterly defeated? Now, it seemed that the Great Luo Heaven Domain indeed had profound foundations and could not be underestimated. They would need to adjust their stance going forward. Thinking of this, Dragon Arm Supreme and the Withered Elder nodded inwardly, cupping their fists and bowing to Mandala. Their posture, compared to before, clearly showed more sincere respect and submission. The square continued to buzz with excitement as the two emperors had already appeared. The meeting of the kings had essentially completed its purpose. Mandala's golden eyes, filled with authority, swept across the crowd before she suddenly spoke. You all must be aware of the recent news regarding the ancient Heavenly Palace ruins appearing on Tian Luo continent. As soon as these words were spoken, the square fell into a momentary silence, only for countless powerful figures to reveal expressions of intense anticipation. The rumors of the ancient Heavenly Palace had spread across Tian Luo continent, and it had even become the hottest topic in the Northern Domain. The ancient Heavenly Palace was the only true powerhouse in Tian Luo continent's history to have reigned supreme since ancient times. Even during the era of great heroes, the ancient Heavenly Palace was exceptionally prominent. Its creator was none other than the Heavenly Emperor, one of the 9 emperors of the ancient era. The ancient Heavenly Palace vanished during the invasion of the extraterritorial clan in ancient times, leaving no trace behind. In the past, there were occasional rumors about its ruins, but they were eventually proven to be false. But this time, everyone knew it was real. Because all the major powers with ambitions on Tian Luo continent were now closely monitoring the direction of the ruins. This kind of relic offers boundless opportunities. Even I am tempted. I have reached a consensus with the leaders of the other top forces in the Northern Realm Alliance, and we will join forces as an alliance to compete for the ancient Heavenly Palace. Mandala's voice rang out again, causing the eyes of many powerful figures to burn with even greater intensity. They had no doubt about Mandala's words. The ancient Heavenly Palace left behind by the Heavenly Emperor contained opportunities that could make even a high-ranking Earth Supreme, or even a perfected Earth Supreme, or any formidable being capable of reaching the Heavenly Supreme Realm, yearn for its power. Of course, they were even more eager. The ancient Heavenly Palace once ruled Tian Luo continent invincibly. If they could gain some of its opportunities, their strength would increase by leaps and bounds, just like Mu Chen and Nine Nether King. As for the alliance, it was inevitable. The Northern Realm was not particularly impressive on Tian Luo continent due to constant conflicts, making it difficult for a hegemonic power to emerge. If the Domain Lord of the Great Luo Heaven Domain hadn't broken through to the Upper Earth Supreme, even this alliance would have been hard to form. To compete with the massive forces from other regions of Tian Luo continent, they would need to unite with other top forces in the Northern Realm. Otherwise, relying solely on the Great Luo Heaven Domain would obviously not be enough. Dragon Arm Supreme and the Withered Elder exchanged a glance, their eyes filled with anticipation. They had been 9th grade Supremes for many years, and countless 9th grade Supremes remained stuck at this level throughout their lives, unable to break through to the Earth Supreme realm. They didn't have much confidence in crossing that threshold. But if they could enter the ancient Heavenly Palace ruins, they might gain more opportunities. Thus, the two of them immediately cupped their fists and declared aloud, "We support the Domain Lord's decision, and will spare no effort to assist." As their powerful voices echoed, numerous strong figures in the square immediately voiced their agreement. The overwhelming display was truly spectacular. Mu Chen, watching this scene, took a deep breath. His expression remained calm, but his slightly trembling fingers revealed the turmoil in his heart. When he left the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy with Nine Nether, came to Tian Luo continent, entered the Northern Realm, and then arrived at the Great Luo Heaven Domain. He had been continuously honing his skills, raising his status step by step. All his hard work, wasn't it for this very moment? The ancient heavenly palace holds the method for evolving the great sun indestructible body. Only by obtaining it can Mu-Chen's supreme Dharmakaya truly undergo a transformation. While the great sun indestructible body is remarkable, as Mu-Chen's strength continues to grow, its potential is gradually being exhausted. He knows that once he steps into the Earth's supreme stage, the help it provides will likely diminish to the lowest level. After all, no matter how mysterious it is, it remains merely a basic supreme Dharmakaya. Therefore, you must ensure that the great sun indestructible body evolves successfully. Only then can he seize the initiative at every step, moving closer to pursuing the legendary primordial law body, the eternal undying body. That is the perfect Dharmakaya that would even stir the heavenly supreme. It is also the ambition that Mu-Chen has concealed in his heart for so long. When the day comes that he succeeds, this great thousand worlds will be at his mercy, and no one will be able to stop him. By then, even the mysterious clan where his mother belongs will hold no fear for him. Thus, Mu-Chen is perhaps the one who is most eager for the ancient heavenly palace to appear. Mandala gazed at the bubbling plaza and the fiery enthusiasm in the eyes of countless powerful beings. Then, her gaze turned to Mu-Chen. Though his expression remained calm, she still noticed the excitement hidden deep within his eyes. She smiled faintly, clearly. Everyone's interest was piqued. She turned her head, her golden eyes gazing into the distant horizon, as if piercing through space to see the ancient ruins far away. Now that the ancient heavenly palace ruins have appeared, it seems that person will also make his appearance. She knows well the importance he places on the ancient heavenly palace. With that thought, Mandala's slender hand brushed her wrist, feeling the curse within her that once caused her unbearable pain. A cold glint passed through her golden eyes. The grudges of the past are finally about to come to an end.